Every life has a story, and every story is worth sharing. Your story, my story, and our story speak of victory and defeat, joy and sorrow, resilience and vulnerability. They are not just our story, they are Christ's story in us. They are Kingdom Stories from Down Under.
When your spiritual father introduces you to someone, you know you're in for a ride. You know that you will connect with that person very well. This is the case with my guest here tonight, with Lance Hall, who was acquainted with Dr. Bob Chapman, who was my spiritual father and who also had a massive impact in his life. And as soon as we connected, we began a journey together. I don't know too much about Lance, but I do know a little bit, enough to invite him to the show and discover more about his journey. Welcome to the show, Lance.
No, thank you for having me.
So I suppose your life began long before Dr. Bob Chapman came into your life.
It did. I was actually born, yes. I was born into the church. My mother...
You were born into the church?
Yeah, basically. I was born a Presbyterian.
Oh.
My mother was a Presbyterian.
So we won't hold that against you.
Yeah, that's right. And my granny, my father's mother, was a very spiritual person and used to go to church all the time. And
2-3 generations, eh?
Yes, and so a bit like Timothy.
Yeah.
My father wasn't, he went to youth group, but he later didn't choose to go to church, so it was really just my mother and my granny, we used to call her.
Yeah.
Used to be the spiritual people in my life.
Yeah.
I got a brother and sister, a younger sister and a younger brother. I'm the oldest in the family.
Nice.
And so we grew up in a Presbyterian church on Kitchener Road in Melville.
Nice.
Melville Presbyterian Church. And
what is it called now?
it's still called Melville Uniting Church now.
Okay.
But it was the Presbyterian Church, and had Reverend Jack Hutchinson, who was an ex-missionary from Vanuatu, or New Hebrides, as we know.
Yeah.
And he was the head of the church.
Yes.
Very spiritual man.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very strong preacher. Used to teach the basics, very much the basic teaching.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the church from a baby all the through. I went through the Boys Brigade, and I got christened, as they did in those days. They christened people, and then went to Boys Brigade or Sunday school, youth group. And
Boys Brigade. Is Boys Brigade part of a ministry?
Boys Brigade is its own brigade. They run that in Australia, and it's for young men to join and be brought up.
Is that a Christian or
Christian? Yeah.
It is Christian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure and steadfast is their motto.
Yeah.
And so we were brought up. Had some great mentor. Had a great mentor at the Boys Brigade in Dick Harmson, who's now passed away. But he was one of my mentors, as well as Jack Hutchinson, the pastor.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in the church, and eventually, when I was 17, 18, I'd finished high school. I basically left that church and went on my independence. I went out to do farm management or farming, and that's when I left the church. Had a bit of connection over the years, but basically that was the end of the full time going to that church. So
So did you leave the church in that period at all, or like fully left the church? You weren't connected with Christianity?
Yeah, so I went over east to do my farm management studies at Orange Ag College. But before I did that, I had to do a year in 1981. I had to do a year of farming, and so I was working in the country. I'd come back occasionally to the church and catch up with the youth and that sort of thing, but I was becoming independent.
Okay.
It was a different.
So you were born here in Perth?
I was born here in Perth, born in Melville, yes.
Okay, nice.
1963, yeah.
Beautiful.
Up the road from our pastor. He used to live down at the T-junction of our street, so we used to see his light on most evenings and late in the morning sometimes. I used to spend a lot of time praying.
Yeah, early mornings.
Early mornings, just praying.
Wow.
So he was a good leader. He was a good man.
It's nice to grow up with such strong people around you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good role models.
He was a great role model. His dying words to his son were, "One more for Christ."
Wow.
And his son said, "I think you've done enough, Dad. I think it's time to go and meet Christ himself."
Wow.
So yeah, it's a pretty special time.
It's a beautiful way to go, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Mum was very in tune with Christianity. Your dad wasn't so much?
Dad, yeah, Mum was the spiritual head of the household, basically.
Yeah.
Dad never objected to us. He was always gave us the freedom to do what we liked with church, encouraged us to go and supported Mum and
He benefited from it all, for sure.
Of course, yeah.
And he knew that the kids are going to get a good moral education. And
Yep, and he sometimes came and cooked at church camps because he was a great cook, and so he used to come and cook for us. And he's
Nice.
had some of the best preachers try to bring the gospel to him, but he's a sort of happy-go-lucky guy who really just to be like
never committed. to the
never
Lord.
committed, water off the duck's back, never
Yeah.
really took it in. So it was very interesting having that dynamic in the family.
When your mum married him, he's even at the time he wasn't in the faith. So your mum married him even though she knew that he wasn't a Christian man.
Well, that's a good question. I never got to ask that question, but he was going to the youth group when they met.
Okay.
So they were meeting in a youth group in the hills somewhere, and so she met him. He
Yeah.
was at the youth group, but since that time of marriage to, as I was growing up, he wasn't present at the church. He never made it a regular thing. He'd come occasionally, but he wouldn't make it a regular thing.
Mm.
So yeah, it was interesting dynamic in our family.
And being the older, a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. You feel that responsibility.
I think as the older of the siblings, you always have some sort of responsibility. You want to feel responsible for things, and I think that the siblings look at you a little bit like that. You're
Yeah.
the oldest, so you're going to take responsibility whether you like it or not.
You didn't disappoint them.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. My sister and brother are not walking with the Lord, and probably they're probably taking Dad's side more than anything else, which is what happens when you have that sort of division in a family. And so yeah, sometimes my sister's the one that we have a lot of issues with, but I'm the oldest, and so I'm also meant to be the peacemaker in some respects, trying to keep the peace.
That's
and
right.
being the Christian, we're not.
And growing up, how was it? Were you still the peacemaker and really in the mix of it all? Were you looking after them? Did you have to take care of them?
They were pretty.
Rescue them?
No, they were pretty independent.
Okay.
My brother's pretty independent. He was the youngest by 5 years, and so he was left at home with Mum and Dad and was spoilt, like all the young mums seem to get spoilt.
Yeah.
My sister always felt like she was the middle child and had the middle child syndrome, and wasn't always in favour with Dad. Dad was always looking down on her, so she's carried that for her life. So yeah, it's been an interesting dynamic. So as the oldest one and leaving home at 17, basically you miss a lot of what goes on in the family. But my sister found it pretty tough, and she left home pretty young, probably about 17, 18. She left home as well, and went out and be independent as well. So yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic.
How were your teenage years? Pretty close to God, close to family. Didn't have a period of rebellion or drifting.
My pastor would tell you that I wasn't a golden child.
No.
I was always in trouble with him. His daughter was about the same age, a bit older. We used to get into a few trouble. When I was in Boys Brigade, we were a bit of a stirring bunch of lads, and we used to upset all the camps and cause all sorts of dramas. And so I wasn't an angel, I can tell you that much. But, was told one night to pack my bags and you're going back home the next day. But the leader reneged and forgave, and we were able to stay. But it was a fun time. But
so the highlights would be the camps. Those would be the highlights of your
camps.
holidays.
Youth was big in our church. We had about 100 kids at our youth group.
Oh, amazing!
And so we had a huge youth group and a huge dynamic and some great leaders and.
Where would you go? Down south on the camps?
Yeah, we went Logue, Dam, places out there, down Bustleton, Serpentine. I think we went. We'd go camping. We'd do all sorts of things. We were doing everything we could do that young people did then. It was really good. And people, youth used to come from all over West Australia. Like, we used to come from Cottesloe to go to Melville.
Yeah.
The youth group was well known. So.
Oh, nice.
And it was good. It was good.
Were you playing any sports in your teens?
Well, I went to a private. So I left the public system and went to a private school, Scotch College, at at a year for year 6 and year 7.
Whoa.
And
It's a lot of money.
My parents were middle class. Mum worked at a retirement village and my father worked on the wharf, shift worker.
Yeah.
And they worked very hard to provide for that education. All three of us went to that school.
So why did they put you into Scotch?
Good question. I think there was a family connection somewhere along the track, but that was their aim, to give us a good education. And so, I was the first to go to Scotch. My sister went to PLC and my brother went to Scotch as well.
And you finished high school there?
I finished, high school there. So, So my sports career, my sports stuff, I used to get involved in rugby and also rowing. So I was in the first 8 rowing.
So on the river?
We used to row on the Swan River back then.
In Mosman Park? Where was it? Or Peppering Road?
We used to row along the bottom of Kings Park there.
Oh, Crawley.
Crawley, yeah. We used to do the 2,000 metre row, which is fairly heavy for first dates.
That's why you've got the big arms and the
I don't know
upper
about
body.
that. Might have been.
Yeah. Both rugby and rowing would have given you a strong upper body.
Yes, yeah. So,
Beautiful. And then when you finished year 12, you decided to go to an agricultural college?
Yeah, well, I had a cousin who had a dairy farm in Pinjarra, and I had a lot of friends at school that were into agriculture, and I had no clue, absolutely no clue what I wanted to do as a career. So we were sitting in the library one day, and we were talking about what we're going to do, and somebody said, "Oh, I'm checking out this place called Orange Ag College. They'll take anybody from West Australia." And I said, "Oh, well, I might join you." So we signed up there and then to go to Orange Ag College. And
where was this, in Victoria or New South Wales?
In New South Wales.
Okay.
Yeah, it's near Bathurst.
Okay.
Orange is near Bathurst. It's where the apples grow. Okay. Orange is where the apples grow.
So they have a school, college? Is it like
had an ag college. We did an associate diploma in farm management. So that's what I signed up for. Yeah, so
2 years?
2 years.
Full time?
Full time.
And you moved there?
Yep, moved onto campus to start with for the first year. Then we had to move off campus the second year. Lived in the town.
And a lot of practicals?
Yeah, we used to travel out there and do practice all the time. We had to work on the farm that they ran as well. So it was very...
Was it fun for you? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, I loved it.
Oh, you loved it?
Yeah, great lifestyle. Yeah.
So when you finished school, what did you do? You started working? You came back here or you began working?
I came back here. I hadn't quite finished my degree. Had some financial... My parents paid for most of the...
course?
The course. I had to pay for the rent and I was working in between studies. So... and I had a lovely Christian family out at Molong, which is only about 50 k's down the road, that used to say, just rock up and we'll pay you $40 a day.
Wow.
And so if I needed money, I'd just go out there and work there and earn enough money to pay the rent. But it's taxing when you're trying to do exams, you're trying to study. So in the end, there was a bit too much pressure and I didn't quite finish. So I came back here to finish off the studies and try to get a job. But because I hadn't gone to Muresk at college, no one would employ me, so it was a bit difficult finding work. So So and then my career, I went and worked for a livestock firm. Yeah. And I worked for a farmer, then got a job with a livestock firm. Oh no, sorry, other way around, livestock firm. And they were not very great. They weren't great. Their integrity wasn't great as a company, and I felt that being a Christian, I couldn't work for these people who were just ripping farmers off, basically. Yeah. And so I left them and then worked for a farmer for a while and applied for a mature age apprenticeship or mature age place in Coles supermarkets. Okay. And so I entered them at the age of 21 to do the traineeship with them.
That would have led you to management?
Yeah, it did. Eventually led me to management. So I went through the ranks. Yeah, I went through the ranks there as trainee to nightfall manager to grocery manager or merchandise manager. And then I jumped ship and went to Wesfarmers and worked in Kalgoorlie.
Woolies? At Woolies?
No, Wesfarmers.
Okay.
They used to run, they owned Charlie Cars at one stage, but before they used to have Farmer Jacks. And
yes.
So I went out to Kalgoorlie. Ruth and I got married.
That's where you met Ruth?
Met Ruth at youth group.
Here in town?
In Melville. She was going to the Melville youth group.
Okay, local girl?
Yeah.
Grew up here?
Yeah.
Did you know her before you went to New South Wales or not?
We had met. I'd come back for a year from the first year.
Yeah.
And I'd met Ruth at a camp.
Okay.
And basically we were at a camp together. I was with somebody else, but Ruth tells me that she saw me and told her friend that I was the person she was going to marry. And so I was numbered. And so, yeah, so on my return trip from after the second year, I was driving across the Nullarbor and I thought, I wonder if that girl is still going to the youth group.
Yeah.
And I rocked up to the youth group the weekend that I got back, and there was Ruth, and that's history.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you saw her, your eyes connected.
Yeah.
You knew there was something there. She knew it all along. She was just waiting for you
That's waiting for me, probably. Yes.
to have the awareness that this was going to happen.
And she said no many times before she said yes. So
She knew how to play, how to get.
yes, that's right.
Smart girl.
In the end, I didn't ask her. We
Yeah.
just went to the jewellery shop and looked at rings, and eventually said, "Oh, we might as well get one." And she said, "Does that mean we're getting married?" And I said, "I suppose it does."
You meant business though.
Yep, of course. Knew what I wanted. I only had $700 in my paycheck that I had from the.
Yeah.
That was all I had, and I committed it all.
So where did you get married?
When did we get married?
Where?
We got married in the church in Melville and by Jack Hutchison.
Oh, beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah, 1986, yeah.
Did you have to ask her parents for her hand?
Yes, of course. You've
How-
got to do that.
How did you do that?
That was an interesting evening, that was. Dad was Ruth is the youngest of 6.
Okay.
And so Dad was, how old was Dad? He was retired.
Her dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
He was retired, so he was fairly old. And so I had to go and approach him. And he was watching his favourite show on TV. And basically, he didn't like being interrupted when he was watching his favourite show. And I'm trying to have a conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I think it was Pot Black he watched, and that was his favourite show.
Yep.
Had to wait for that to finish, so I'm sitting there waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I asked him if it was okay to marry Ruth, and he just said, "Do you think you can put up with her?"
Good question.
And so, yeah, so it started from there.
And you said yeah?
Yeah, of course.
And then what did he say?
Not much after that. He just went back to watching his program. So it
Were
was
you
all-
nervous while you were waiting?
Absolutely nervous. It's a big thing.
I know. But he acted so casual about it.
Oh, well,
He had-
he obviously knew that was coming, I think.
He had experience. He had 6 girls before that. Yeah.
Not 6 girls. He had
Oh, 6.
boys before that.
Oh,
He had rather one girl, but yeah, no.
only one girl?
Yeah.
And you took her away?
No, 2. He had just 2.
Oh.
Older sister as well.
Okay. So
Yeah.
4 boys, 2 girls.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
So you're back in Perth now, married.
Got
and
married, yeah.
Not married yet?
Yeah, we were married in 86, yeah.
And you're working as a, in Coles?
I was working at Coles.
Yeah.
I had just finished night fill manager. I
Yeah.
had a deal with the manager at Belmont
Yeah.
that he wanted me to go into night fill.
Yeah.
And I was about 6 months out from being married.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, look,
I'll
can't-
do it until marriage.
I said, I'm happy to do it, but I want to go back on the days when I'm married. He says, if you do it, it's a deal.
So he...
He said, I'll
honoured-
make sure you come off the night fill when
Yeah.
you're married. And he kept his word. He was a great man.
Great.
He kept his word, and we had a good relationship. He just said, I expect this sort of presentation. Doesn't matter how long it takes to do it. I just want the job done properly.
Awesome.
And we used to do the job properly, and he was good to his word.
And what took you to Kalgoorlie?
So Kalgoorlie was when I had an issue with one of the Coles stores in Kwinana, where I'd overheard a bit of dissension about, or a bit of backstabbing going on in
Yeah.
the company, where someone was accusing me of something that I didn't do
Yeah.
in the aisle next to me while I was doing some shelf filling.
Yeah.
And so I decided, well, I'm not going to put up with that. So I went for an interview with West Farmers and got a job with them as assistant manager at their
In
store
Kalgoorlie?
in Kalgoorlie.
And Ruth was okay to just
Yeah,
move?
we were married, and she moved, and she went on and did some dental nursing
Okay.
while we were there. But it's a tough town for ladies,
Yeah.
and but it was a good experience.
How long were you there?
Roughly 13 months.
Okay. And local church?
That was an issue because this manager I worked with He was such a real worker. He was a workaholic.
Yeah.
He worked 7 days a week.
And he expected
he
you
used
to
to
do the
start
same.
at 5 in the morning. And I wanted to try and compete with him. And so I would get up at the same time and go to work, and I'd work 7 days a week. So church was falling away quite a bit. And one day I'd run myself basically in the ground after many, many weeks. And one day I went into him and says, I just can't keep coming in this early. It just seems to be pointless. I'm running out of energy.
Steam.
And he said, I was waiting for you to tell me that. He was a pretty good fellow too. He was a good wise person too. He was just didn't see how far I would go.
Yeah.
But we got on really well. It was a good relationship.
Did you make manager in the end?
Yes. After 11 months there,
Yeah.
I was moved to Australind to become manager before my 25th birthday.
Oh, well done.
So yeah,
At Farmer Jack in Australia.
at Farmer Jackson, Australind.
Yeah, so you moved across back to on the coast.
Yes.
It's a nice place, Australia.
Yeah, it is.
And how long were you there?
I was there for about 11 months again. And then we had a baby while I was there. That was our son. He was born.
His name?
His name's Benjamin.
Benjamin. Beautiful.
And so he was born.
Why did you call him Benjamin?
It was all because of Ben Hall, the bushranger.
I thought it was more biblical, more spiritual.
We were going to call. We planned to call him Benjamin, and my mother was, "Oh no, you can't call him Benjamin. That's Ben Hall, the bushranger."
Oh.
And we went, "Oh, okay." So friends of ours, we thought, we might have to call him Matthew. So we sort of to and fro about the name, and then the butcher's wife had a baby, and they called it Matthew.
So you couldn't have Matthew and...
So we just said, oh, no, it's got to be Benjamin. But mother had gone out and told everybody when the baby was born it was going to be called Matthew. So when she found out, she wasn't too happy about it, but she got over it.
That's cute. That's cute. So your mum was quite involved in your life, very close to you guys.
Yeah, very close. Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, Mum was very close. And then from Australind, I then went down to Albany to sort out problems down there. And then they had bought Charlie Carter's. Wesfarmers had bought Charlie Carter's. They employed too many managers. I wasn't a quiet manager. I was always pretty vocal about things that I wanted to see changed.
Yep.
And so I got basically the supervisor came in and said, we don't need your services anymore. And so I left the job. But it was an answer to prayer, because 2 weeks prior to that I said to the Lord, basically, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
What is this job role? Like people know that I'm a Christian here. Like, it's not as if they all know. They knew before I even got here that I was a Christian.
Yeah.
And I said, but what am I doing here? I don't see any fruit of whatever's going on here. You know, I've trained these people well. They're good staff members. But, show me this if I'm meant to stay here.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, the supervisor came and said, we don't need you. And I went, oh, thank you. And he said, what, you're not upset? I said, no.
That's an answer to prayer. I love
My
that.
wife was upset because she didn't know it was coming, so she wasn't very
So
happy.
did she nest in Albany?
Well, we had our Sarah was born
In Albany.
in Albany,
Okay.
and we were in a company house.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to move out of the company house.
Back towards Perth? Or?
No, we actually stayed. I was involved with the youth group
Mm-hmm.
at the Church of Christ down there and
Okay.
running that. And
So you're back quite committed to Christianity, quite committed at this stage to the church life?
like I became a Christian when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Baptized?
No, baptised when I took over the youth group in Church of Christ, because that was a requirement.
Okay.
Because I was christened
In Albany?
in Albany,
Okay.
in the water.
So full immersion,
Yes,
finally.
yes,
Okay, good.
yes.
And Ruth, had she been immersed as well?
Yes, she had been. Eventually she was. She was done in a bath, though. She wasn't done in the ocean like me.
Okay.
She had the bath, but they forgot to turn the heater on, so it was just as cold.
Nice.
Because when we baptise in Albany,
You gotta
you've got to
remember
make
it.
sure
Yeah.
that they're truly baptised. So you've got to have Arctic waters
Yeah.
to be baptised in. So that's-
Antarctic waters. Yeah. Wow. So you had to move from the company house as well?
Yes, had to move from company house. So I set up a lawn mowing round from scratch. I got a trailer built, bought some equipment, and started doing lawn mowing.
Back to agriculture.
Yeah. Well, as a kid, I was fascinated by a lawnmower, and
Yes.
so I used to follow the lawn mowing man around when he used to visit. And if I went missing, my mother would look for a lawn mowing, and she'd find
She'd
me
know.
running around behind the lawnmower with my little toy lawnmower mowing the lawn. So I was real passionate. I loved mowing the lawn. One of my grandfathers actually taught me how to mow the lawn when I was about 10.
Beautiful.
And so I used to go to Mandurah and mow the lawn for him. He used to always make sure it was long enough for me to mow it when I got there. So I had this real passionate lawn mowing.
Nice.
And so setting up lawn mowing around was great. I had a good time doing that, built it up from nothing.
So from nothing, just through word of mouth, a bit of marketing.
Yeah, a few church people helped and got their lawns done, Eventually built it up to about 60.
Which is that's good business.
It needed to be about 120, but we were surviving, surviving. But it was going well.
Yeah.
And then my mother got diagnosed with motor neurone disease.
Oh.
And so this is her 25th year of her passing. So she got diagnosed with motor neurone disease. And
How old was she? 60?
58 when she was diagnosed.
And how long did she live after that? About 5 years?
Died at 63.
3 years? 4 years?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah, died at 63. So So we made a decision to sell everything, and my mother said, "Don't you do anything silly and come up here to Perth, And we're going, yes,
That's exactly what you did.
Yes, Mum, no worries. So we fudged it a bit, and I sold my gear off to a lawn mowing contractor who needed someone. He wanted to have a holiday, so he said, "If you look after my lawn mowing around, and he was a Christian or a new Christian. He said, "You look after my lawn around, and while I go and have a holiday," and then so I worked for him for a while.
Yeah.
And then we eventually packed everything up and moved to Perth.
Sold that to him.
Sold it. Yeah, he bought half the round with another lawn mowing contractor because the way I set it up, my prices were higher than most people.
So it was good for him.
It was
attractive.
Yeah, very attractive. And so they took it all, which was good. And I got a job out of it for a while, which kept food on the table, and then was able to move back to, we went to Bibra Lake, stayed there for 3 months, and then moved to Mandurah to work for a community group to set up the Peel Youth Program, which is called Peel Youth Services today.
Was that a government business?
It was funded by Burdekin for street homeless children and street children. So Burdekin Foundation funded this project, and so we were employed under that through our community group. That was a Pinjarra youth group, and it wasn't a church group.
And was your mum in Albany?
Mum was
in
Perth,
Mandurah?
In Perth.
She's
in Perth, yeah.
So you could visit her and spend time with her?
It was closer to her. So
Did she deteriorate fast?
Yes, she not as fast as some people do, but she deteriorated enough that it was pretty sad watching her lose her voice.
Yeah.
That was probably the worst because she was a pretty happy person.
Yeah.
She still liked to have a giggle and carry on, but losing her voice, not being able to communicate was pretty.
Yeah.
And
it's a nasty disease. You just
terrible.
lose. I mean, you're 100% conscious, yet you can't do. You just see your muscles deteriorate, and eventually you suffocate.
And that's what happened to her. She made it to my sister's wedding and died a couple of days later.
Wow, that was something for her to fight on.
Yeah. So it was pretty hard, but she had a plan when she got diagnosed. She told my father that I do not want to go into a home.
Yeah.
She said, I don't care what your social life is, keep doing what you want to do, go to the club, whatever, but I just want to stay at home. So Dad honoured that, and he looked after her, fed her. My auntie used to come over and sit with her when Dad went and did his football duties and stuff like that. And so it was a good arrangement, and Mum was able to die at home, which was what she wanted. So it was a tough time, but it was.
Yeah, it would have been. It's a slow death, but you get the opportunity to at least to transition and sort of sink it in. I've had some good friends pass away with motor neuron. My Bible college principal, he had motor neuron. Then another student of ours at the Australian School of Ministry, he had motor neuron and he passed away while he was studying.
There's 182 cases in WA now.
Yeah.
I only know that because I just went to the motor neurone disease fundraiser.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a debilitating thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so she passed away, and she had when she withdrew from the church, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
It was something that she used to get a lot of visitors from church, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
But she'd committed her whole life to the church, and so it was tough for her not to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So so that was a bit of a tough time.
And then you settled in Mandurah with that became more of a settlement than the other, because you transitioned, you moved quite a bit, but now you with this job you were more localized. Yeah,
so I was basically I had a friend who was in the churches. He was in the church down there, Westminster Presbyterian Church, and he said, "Why don't you apply for this job?" He was on the board.
Yes.
And so I was employed with another man to a guy called Bert Winning to set this program up.
Yes.
Probably wasn't a great idea having two coordinators running the show.
Yeah.
Someone should have been subordinate, but because we parted company about after a year, Bert went on and did other things. And so, but the program got set up and running.
Yes.
And I was involved with the church down there, the Westminster Presbyterian Church, and then did probably about 18 months. And then we tried to transition to an independent incorporated body.
Yeah.
Of course, because I'm not a quiet person, I was quite vocal about the government department that were overseeing it.
Yeah.
They were trying to push us into a mentoring situation, but we were still doing all the foundational work with the schools and trying to connect with kids in school, doing preventative work as well as some of the street kids. He didn't agree with the direction we were, or the slowness, how slow we were taking. So he stopped the funding, and I was unemployed from then on. So then I worked for the Commonwealth Employment Service doing training courses.
Yep.
And then they wouldn't employ me because I didn't finish my degree in agriculture.
Oh.
And I didn't have a degree in pencil sharpening.
Yes.
So they wouldn't employ me in the Commonwealth Employment Service.
Oh.
So I went to the pastor and said, at the time, and he said, "Well, what were you good at school?" And I said, "Well, two top
Maths.
subjects was accounting and geography." And he said, "Well, which one do you think's going to have a
Bring
job?"
you money.
And I said, "Accounting's probably going to have a job." So I went off and did study.
So you went to do
started doing study at Edith Cowan in Bunbury.
A Bachelor of Business.
Bachelor of Business, Commerce, end up with, and I always wanted to do management accounting.
Okay.
I told God, I don't want to do this tax rubbish,
Yeah.
this tax accounting. So I wanted to do this management accounting.
Yeah.
And I ended up finishing my degree with a double major in public accounting, public practice, and
Management.
Commerce. And so it was tax accounting that I ended up doing. But God knows, because as soon as I had my degree,
you got a job.
I got a job with my accountant, who was my accountant in Albany.
Yeah.
And I moved back to Albany.
She went back to Albany. Oh.
Back to Albany to work.
And Ruth's not complaining.
We moved a few times. We have moved a few times in our married life, and so we were getting pretty good at moving.
Yeah.
But this was at least a full-time job. It wasn't. It looked like it had a good future.
At least you couldn't add too much clutter around the place. You had to
we decluttered all the time. had a print. Hadn't used it for 6 months. It was out the door.
Yeah.
So we never kept much, and but we used to know how to travel and knew how to pack. And I hated moving though, just hated it in the end.
Yeah.
But so I went to Albany and worked with Snow and Associates.
Yeah.
The head of the Snow and Associates was a Christian. My immediate boss was a Christian guy.
Yeah.
And so it was good. It was a good start.
Now, compared to what you learn in university and what you actually do every day, it's a different ballgame, isn't it?
Yeah. Well. You do a lot of theory.
Yeah.
When you put it in practice, I'm thankful for computers.
Yeah.
Because computers do all the thinking, and I don't have to think as much. But you still got to know what you're going to do.
Especially now, we've advanced so much.
It's
so pre-filled in. I mean, people can do their tax on their phone in 10 minutes, really.
Yeah.
If they've just got basic stuff,
Yeah. So I started when GST came in. Mm-hmm. So I was very popular because I knew about it.
It made sense to you.
And because I was able to, by then I was able to lead in church and do some do messages and stuff in church when I was younger. I was able to teach people, the clients, about GST,
Yeah.
which no accountants, except for my immediate boss, who also preached in church and led in church,
They
we
couldn't
could
teach,
speak.
couldn't
Whereas
explain.
other accountants couldn't do it. They
Couldn't
couldn't do
explain.
it. And so I walked into a firm where these the two partners there weren't going to go near a microphone, and so we started to teach our clients about GST.
So you'd invite them at workshops.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
So we taught them.
And then obviously you got more and more clients that way because you became experts. You became more embedded in the community.
Well, we got a lot enough work, that's for sure, but it was just to service the clients, so I'd be able to explain it to them. So it was a good timing, and it's God's timing because here I was not wanting to be an accountant
And
or
now,
a tax accountant.
Yeah,
and
now that's exactly what
and
you
as soon as I finished, I walked straight into a job and knew what was the current topic, which was GST.
And the kids loved Albany as they were growing up?
Yeah, great place for the kids to grow up.
Yeah.
We were involved with the Church of Christ there,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids were doing really well there.
Beautiful.
But when we left Albany the first time, we'd separated from the Church of Christ because the church had a split.
Oh,
And so when we came back to Albany for the accounting time, we then went and involved in the new church that had split, which was called North Albany Community Church.
yeah.
And I became an elder there. And we had a period of 18 months without a pastor.
Oh,
And so there was just two elders, and we were both workers. One was the shearer.
yeah,
I was an accountant.
yeah,
And it was a time when we stood up in front of the church and went, I'm an accountant. I work 5 days a week. He's a shearer. He works 6 days a week. We haven't got time to do all the work.
Yeah.
We need your help.
yeah.
So it's time to stand up and do something to help us. And so
They
when
had-
it came to people going to hospital and things like that, the
Pastoral
church
care.
rose.
Yeah.
They went and did all that for us. We used to hear about, such and such was in hospital. Oh, yeah, that's nice. I can't quite make it. Oh, you don't need to get there. There's been 10 people visited them today, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time before we had a pastor.
And that's how it should be, I think.
Well, it was a good lesson. We had a lot of unity in the church because of that, because people were
For
felt,
crossing bridges.
they were basically involved. They had a place. They filled gaps, and everybody was doing something. It was a good time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So.
What was next?
So then I got this brainstorm that I'd go out on my own.
Oh,
And so I had a man on a motorbike come down from the Christian Motorcycle Club who was an accountant and convinced me to go in partnership with him.
yeah,
And so I got my tax agent license because he needed it.
mm-hmm.
And I didn't realise how much he needed it until I started working for him. So I started working moved back to Mandurah.
Okay,
And
he was a
I
mentor.
went into partnership with him,
Mm-hmm.
so-called partnership with him.
Yeah,
It
but you
didn't-
were doing all the work.
He couldn't operate without my license, and I was getting paid 25%, so it wasn't such a fair deal.
No.
And eventually we parted company, so I went out and did my own work in about 2008, 7, 8, I was on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically I set up a little practice.
Yeah.
I was consulting with a retirement village.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Lady Brand at the time.
Yeah.
And I was working with the two Brians, Brian Fencock and Brian Brand,
Mm-hmm.
and helping them, consulting with them, dealing with some issues. And then Brian Brand had a massive heart attack at the breakfast table and was intestate, didn't have a will.
Yeah.
And so therefore there was a lot of things happening at that time. The other Brian Fencock was panicking about the whole scenario. No will. Who was going to be in control? Who was going to step in from the family?
Yeah.
So he asked me to step in as director
Mm-hmm.
to take the position up so that we could stop an overtake from the family.
Yeah.
So I did, and basically started a journey with the retirement village. My practice was shut down.
Mm-hmm.
I kept a few clients. I still
Yeah.
kept doing accounting.
Yeah.
Every year I still did accounting, but I kept a handful of clients to keep my hand in.
Yeah.
But I basically started as a director, and I walked into Lady Brand having to deal with a lot of problems. So
Oh, another journey, another experience.
major experience. That's where I met Bob Chapman,
Oh,
because we employed Bob, or we supported Bob in to come into the village
Yes.
to do Bible studies, and then we also funded him so he could do his prayer ministry down in the country towns. Yeah.
ah, beautiful.
Well, Yarlett was after, but in the
Yeah,
country,
before
early
that, he used to go into.
go down to Katanning and that. So
Yeah.
So that's where I met Bob.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it was a good, good time. We thought that God was going to keep the village, but he had other intentions, and he eventually shut that down or sold it.
Yeah.
Sold to somebody else.
So you went back to accounting as you would.
No, I didn't actually.
No.
Well, then because we started this journey with Brian, we had some land sitting outside the village, which was meant to be developed to be able to pay off investors.
Yes.
And the village was sold, and the land was still sitting there. And so we had our own building team. So we decided, well, the banks were pushing us to do something.
Yeah.
And so we decided we'd do some investment properties. And we sold these properties to investors. And this was in 2009, which was a pretty tough year with the GFC just happening in 2008.
Yeah.
Actually, 2010, sorry. And so we started selling these properties and building land. So we did this, and we did quite
In Mandurah?
well.
Or?
In Mandurah, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And we did quite well at that. And then we moved on to another project, which was just for cash flow.
Yeah.
And then it just got worse from then. And eventually we got into debt of about $1 million, and I shut the company down. And that was that started a whole new journey. And the journey, I went back to doing accounting for a while, and then because we'd, as directors, been forced to sign indemnity
Guarantee.
insurance,
Yeah.
I was the only director that had any sort of assets.
Oh, they came
And
after you.
the insurance company came and put me into bankruptcy, basically.
Oh,
And so I lost everything and went into bankruptcy.
back to zero.
And but it was a tough time. But it was tougher waiting for that to happen. It was very mental. A lot of, like, if anybody is looking at bankruptcy, my recommendation is just do it.
The sooner the better.
Otherwise, you have this huge mental game, and it can be very stressful.
And
for
it
your
will
family.
cost you more long
Cost
term.
you mental health wise. It costs you a lot, and you just need to do it.
How long did it torment you?
Probably 12 to 18 months, and eventually the day the lawyer rang me and said, "You're lying to me, that you've got more assets than you're telling us," and I'd signed a statutory declaration, and I said, if that's your attitude, I said, just come and get me. And so I knew it was coming, so I just immediately went into bankruptcy. But it was relief.
Yeah.
As soon as we did that, it was just relief.
untouchable.
And then from that day, God has just blessed immensely.
Everything else
Everything.
was a huge turnaround.
I had to give up my practice, but before I did, I happened to just join the IPA, the Independent Public Accountants.
Yeah.
And I just joined them, and I met a young guy there who was up and coming in Mandurah.
Yeah.
And so I happened to just went and saw him one day and said, "This is the story. I'm going to bankruptcy. I'll give you 50% of my practice
Yeah.
if I can work for you. I'm allowed to earn this much money.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?" And he said, he checked me out, and he rang one of the guys that I'd worked for a town part-time. I was going to buy a practice in town.
Yeah.
He knew this guy who was actually the state president of IPA. And the state president, "Oh yeah, he's a nice guy. And he goes off and does mission trips all the time to the Philippines, and does all this work for missions and stuff."
Yeah.
And so the young guy said, "I'm really impressed with that."
Was
said,
he Christian? or
No,
not?
they're not Christian. Still not today.
Yeah.
So I'm working with Mitchell today, and we get on like a house fire. We really do get on well. Probably
So
the best guys.
he bought half of the practice.
Didn't buy it. I just moved it under his name.
Yeah.
And I started working,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't earned as much money ever in my whole. I've been looked after,
Yeah.
and so I started from that day. God blessed me with good income.
Yeah.
I had no debt. I had no mortgages. Had no
Yeah.
credit cards.
Yeah.
So I was cashed up. I was doing well.
Uh-huh.
It was a great time, and we came out of it well.
Praise God.
Yeah.
It's just the stigma, I think, the psychological, as you said, pressure.
Yeah, there's always going to be a stigma, and you always get reminded of that when you
Yeah.
try to go and get loans and things like that. And that can be hard for people to accept.
Does it
that.
still work that much against you? I think these days it's not as difficult anymore.
There's some workarounds, but it can be tough to get loans and things like that. You've just got to, you've got to be persistent
Yeah.
and expect that that's the attitude you're going to face.
Yeah.
When you,
But it's just another
it's
curveball,
a
another bend in the road.
Well, when you look at some of the multi-millionaires,
They all have.
they've all been bankrupt at one stage, some of them.
Well, I went to a quite prominent meeting where I was invited as a guest to speak. And in that meeting, the qualification was either you made $20 million to speak at this session, or you lost $5 million. So to them, it was the same qual. Either you made 20 million, you've been successful, or you lost at least $5 million. That was a prerequisite for you to speak on this platform, because they knew that if you lost $5 million and if you recovered, you're just as qualified as the guy that still has 20 million, in the sense because of the experience that you gain. So you don't think that losing is a qual, but it is a massive qual out there in the business world.
Well, it's an experience, and it's something that I've shared with many people.
Yeah.
I've actually helped people who have been faced with bankruptcy.
Yeah.
In my job, I've come across them. So I'm able to talk to them real. And in fact, I was still in bankruptcy, helping most of them go through their bankruptcy or making a decision to do their bankruptcy.
You know, it's interesting because 2 years ago, before we began the journey of other businesses that I'm involved in, I was approached by a company from Queensland to set up a franchise for them here to help people with bankruptcy. So they handle all the bank, they kind of accountants, but more than that, their qualification is different than an accountant. They're liquidators in the sense, they're administrators. But they had a very lucrative offer for me. And the qualification for that, when they interviewed me, was to have empathy. They said, we can teach you all other skills. You've got the support staff, we've got all the admin, everything behind you. But do you have the empathy, and can you empathize with the person that's going through that period and just meet up with them and walk them, hold their hand, basically. And it's very interesting, it's a job in itself. And it was very tempting to go for it, but I wasn't. The only disadvantage, the thing that didn't do it for me was the fact that they wanted a massive upfront fee. And I said, look, I'll pay you the fee as I go along. And they didn't want to do that. I said, but I'm not going to, put hundreds of thousands of dollars up front to get the franchise.
Yeah. So God was really good. He got us through this bankruptcy. I've only just come out of it in 2020.
So what, it takes 5 years?
It took 3 years. I went in 17, came out in 20.
Okay.
So March.
So what do you mean came out?
So you get 3 years and then you become released from your bankruptcy. You become discharged from it, and then you're free to go on and do business again, basically.
So 3 years you can't be the director of a company. What else?
Can't be a director. You can only earn, you can earn good money. You can earn up to $74,000. You can't have a car that's more than $6,500, or now it's $7,500. It changes every year. Okay. So you were limited in what you could do.
What else? That's about it.
It was gold for me. I thought that was just fantastic. To earn $75,000 was unheard of. I was running practice and battling to do that with all the mortgages and all the debt I had. Yeah, it was just killing me. So God gave me that break.
Relief.
So so that was, and so the journey was good. He found me, Mitchell. Yep. And the practice, and I was able to continue to service my clients. Yep. And so I had that independence. I was also given the freedom to do mission trips. I was able to fly out of the country. Normally, sometimes when you're bankrupt, they won't let you out of the country. But I have never got rejected any time I went to the other country.
Do you have to apply every time?
Apply every time. You've got to pay money every time. And you just write a letter and say, this is what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And they go yes or no. And every time it was yes. So I basically visited Philippines several times in the 3 years, and Singapore, and it was just an amazing journey. Wow. So it was great.
So it is humbling, but at the same time, it's liberating.
Absolutely. If you take it the right way and think this is a fresh start, you can start before you even get out of bankruptcy. Okay. And so, you just...
It's perspective. It's mind thinking. It's the right frame of mind.
And I think if you serve a great God, you know that He's your provider. Yeah. And you don't have to be worrying about things. And we never went without, for sure. And so we were, and even to now, before I got out of bankruptcy, I was caring for an auntie of mine. Mm-hmm. And she said to me that she was going to look after me when she died. Yeah. And so I said, oh, yeah, that's fine, auntie, that's great, But, I really, really would like you to spend money on your own health and get someone to look after you, right? Anyway, so she was always adamant I was visiting in a hospital, do what she wanted to do. Sure. And just because no one else in the family except me, I was the oldest. I was called oldest responsibility,
Yeah.
and the closest thing to her relative. Her
Yeah.
brother was in Albany, so he couldn't help her in East Fremantle. So, but at the end of the day, she passed, and when she passed, she'd arranged it that Ruth would inherit a quarter share of her inheritance.
Estate. Beautiful.
And so we walked out of bankruptcy owning a house.
Oh, praise God.
And so there was a silver lining to the whole thing, and that's God's blessing.
Provision, yeah. And it's a supernatural, miraculous provision just for you to see that He was always there.
Always in control.
Yeah.
Always in control.
Yeah.
And so it was a journey which, look, I can only say it was a great journey.
Yeah.
You look back, you think originally when we were going through all the stress and all the strain of whether they're going to shut us down or make us go bankrupt, and that was causing a lot of stress on my wife.
Yeah.
And it was causing stress on everything.
Of course.
To then make that decision and then see the journey where God just sustained us, provided for us, had places I could rent at a reasonable price. Friends of mine
Beautiful.
rented houses.
This is just amazing, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are facing challenges, and they probably don't even know how to process that, because it's all in the mind. Everything happens in the mind. You just can't deal with it. It's overwhelming. It's just emotions and not know what to do. But in your case, even though the pressure was there, in hindsight now, it seems like I shouldn't even have worried.
Yeah, even to the point where before I went into bankruptcy, because we'd liquidated the building company and we'd sold the village.
Yeah.
We had relationships with people who deal with bankruptcies.
Yeah.
And one of the men from one of the firms rang me, rang the lawyer that I was dealing with through the bankruptcy, and said to him, "Get Lance to ring me."
Yeah.
Or have a coffee. I want to have a coffee with him. So I rang him, and he gave me pointers on how to do bankruptcy well, how to prepare for bankruptcy.
Wow.
And that was just God's blessing. This guy wasn't a Christian.
Yeah.
It's just God put people in my path to give me advice.
And the confidence to go for it, not to hold back.
Yeah, and it was reassuring to have those sort of people that just didn't have to do it, but they decided that they'd come and give me advice to help me get through it, how to start it, what to prepare for.
Beautiful.
And so, in a way, that was a good journey, a lesson for me to learn.
Yeah.
Because I had been a bit careless in some things. Mm-hmm. To get the mortgages, the debts that I'd taken on were careless. And
well, I think we've all done that because the money was thrown at us in the 2000s when the credit was so flexible. We all went into extra mortgage and extra loans.
And
the temptation
was
there.
Yeah, and I was working with people who were entrepreneurial, or they were spending money before they got it. That's how they were.
Yeah.
And I got into that bad habit of spending money before I had it.
Yeah.
And even though I had a wife that was constantly telling me that I was heading into danger, and
we don't didn't
listen.
Yeah.
I got what I deserved in the end, and that was to face this journey in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And so it's a lesson to learn.
Yeah.
And never forget. But the greatest thing to learn is that God is there. He's been there my whole life.
Mm. So if there's a legacy that you want to pass on to the generations who follow you, what would that be?
The legacy would be that to keep going, to keep getting, even if you fall over on your face, to keep getting back up and keep running the race.
Yeah.
Whatever God's assignment is for you, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Until the end. Don't give up.
Yeah. It's not as bad as it is in that epicenter of the problem.
No.
You will come out of it.
That's right. I said, if God is on your side, He will pull you out of it. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're going through. Yeah. He wants us to succeed.
Yeah.
He's got a reason for us not being on this earth. He's got a job for us on this earth.
Yeah.
And He wants to see us succeed. So, whatever hurdles, wherever we fall over, flat on our face, He just wants us to get back up and brush the dust off and keep moving forward.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you, Lance. We learned so much from you today. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight at Kingdom Stories from Down Under. What a tremendous story of resilience, of not giving up on God, and even in the darkest moments when there was no more way out, God provided a way. and you can see the blessings that have come and have been supernaturally poured on him and his family. God has been faithful and he has provided. So you may be facing difficult situations yourself, maybe even financial situations like they were, and you don't know what to do. It is freeing to seek help. It is freeing to do what you have to do and to let go of whatever holds you back. And sometimes you can be ourselves, our ego, but just let go, humble yourself, deal with the situation and let the Lord restore you, because in a very short time, God can restore you. He can do a lot more than you can do yourself. So just trust in God and believe for a miracle in your life, and just carry on and allow the newness of life to be real for you. Let there be a new beginning for you as well. If you love this content, do share it, like it, wherever you're watching it or listening to this. And we will see you next time at Kingdom Stories from Down Under.
Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Stories from Down Under. We'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and share these stories with your wider community. And remember, every story is worth sharing, including yours.